quiet couple weeks. Tara.
I just would like to speak about the fabulous MLK Day in Simsbury event that we had at the First Church of Christ, and we had an unbelievable school representation with our Henry James Select Choir sang and our Simsbury High School Gospel Choir sang. We had Sharon Thomas read one of Martin Luther King's writings, and we had a full house, and it was really quite a special day. And Congresswoman Johanna Hayes came and spent a lot of time with the kids, which I thought was very nice. And I just am very happy and proud of our community and proud of the people who put it together. And I just wanted to thank everyone who came and presented and performed.
Great. Thank you and congratulations. You've been doing that a long time.
I've been doing it a long time.
Jen. Todd. Wow, you all are quiet. Mrs. Lemke.
Last Thursday, the Simsbury Community Spirit Council met for their monthly meeting, and plans are underway to do, along with the Community of Care that sometimes I update you about, a program for the larger Simsbury community on implicit bias. So we are making arrangements for those speakers. We'll also have a presence at the 350th celebration, and the committee is working on kind of their slogan and what we're going to be about and how we're going to communicate that to the larger Simsbury community. But just wanted to share that with the board.
Great. Thank you very much.
Two updates. The first is the work of the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force. We'll be getting together for the first time in a couple of months this Thursday. We're going to meet in the Terriffill room at the public library, and that will be Thursday night at 6. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Thursday night at 6. And while it is a public meeting, there's no public audience at the meeting because it is a working group. The other thing on that front is that we have a draft of a community survey to send out about the work of facilities enrollment. That's getting a final review by this committee and by the board communications committee. We'll finish the draft by the end of this week and be sending it out very shortly to get some feedback about the work of the task force. Second item is down the road, but we should talk about it because communication needs to go out. We've taken a look at the date of our Connecticut presidential primary, which is Tuesday, April 28th. 4 of our schools are polling places. So Terriffill, Tooten Hills, Latimer Lane, and Henry James. The only one of those places that's really used to voting while school goes on is Henry James. So what we have decided to do the next day was April 29th was going to be a half-day professional development. We're going to move the professional development, make the 28th a half-day, and that will just ease with the traffic in the parking lots, getting, the running school while it's a polling place, and we'll really only need to have school open with kids for 3 or 3.5 hours. So we think it's a good move. Wanted to communicate it tonight to the board because then we'll be wanting to get it out to our families shortly. It's 3 months away, but people should know that's the plan. So we think our principals were thrilled with this plan.
Thought it was great.
Great idea.
So as we know, February is Black History Month, and Melanie Meehan, who's our elementary social studies writing coordinator, put together a very dense packet for our principals and teachers to guide them through activities that they can possibly utilize in order to deepen the understanding for students throughout the month. So PA announcements, posters, different kinds of activities that can be publicly spoken about over the PA to the entire school, but also classroom activities that can go on throughout the month. So it was a really impressive packet and opportunity to really focus on our equity work and our vision of the graduate work. So really pleased that we have that chance through the month of February.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
You have anything you want to share?
No, I'm for later.
Mr. Curtis.
I'm good.
You're good. I just want to remind people that through our communications committee, we did publish our Facebook page. So it is available. The link was shared on the Simsbury, Connecticut Facebook page, Simsbury Neighbors Unite, and various other pages. So if you have not had the opportunity, please go like our page. It's not meant for commenting. It's really for informational purposes. So just a heads up, and my fellow board members, if you haven't liked it, go do that. And with that, we are on to recommended actions. Approval of minutes for January 14th, 2020. Can I get a motion?
I move that we approve the January 14 minutes.
Second?
Second?
Any discussion? Any changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Acceptance of a gift, you're abstaining, sorry. Acceptance of gift from Ensign Bickford.
Okay, we have the opportunity tonight, we have some guests here from Ensign Bickford, have put forward a funding to our schools to support our K-12 STEM program. We've had a long time, I'm not sure how many years now that we've been engaged with their work, but it's been quite impressive and really shows in our STEM lab, but we're really looking over the course of the next 3 years to really expand opportunities for students throughout the K-12 program. So I'm going to pass this over before we make a move on their gracious gift. Anytime there's monies over $1,500, it comes to the Board of Education. But before we do that, I'd like to pass it over to John C. Twinick, who's our instructional technology, who oversees and connects with Ensign Bickford folks on a regular basis.
So I just want to personally
Stan.
look at you and you. Anyways, I just want to personally thank Ensign Bickford for all that they've helped us with, and for history of it a little bit. When we started Project Lead the Way at the high school, they actually helped us with the Project Lead the Way. 10 years ago, they helped us start robotics again. And not only through the financial donation they gave us, but also with mentors that came and worked with us, I think, up until about four years ago or so. And so we're looking forward to getting more mentors back with us with robotics and other places that we can in the school district. And also through the co-op program that you've done. And what is it, 5 or 6 years now, I think, maybe about 5 years that you've done that. And our students have just really gotten so much out of this. They've been able, from going through there, they've been able to decide what kind of engineering field they want to, if they want to go into business. So really all the different facets of engineering that you've done provided for them has been great. And the STEM lab, as Aaron said, we wouldn't have been able to have the STEM lab at the high school except for Ensign Bickford. And so we're happy that you're going to continue with that, and also that you're expanding to the elementary and the middle school. So a really positive impact that you've had with us, and we're very happy for that connection and collaboration. So without anything more, I'm going to introduce Chad Thompson, who is our the president of Ensign Bickford, and he'll take the other introductions here.
I'll only take a minute or less, and then I thought I'd give the rest a minute. My name is Chad Thompson. I'm the president of Ensign Bickford. I'm humbled and honored to be able to represent the company and also be a participant in the community activities. I'm also on I'm a board member for the Ensign Bickford Industries Foundation. So we do have a trust of money that we donate out to the communities that we live in. It's an expectation, actually, that we contribute and be involved in the communities. Some of the requirements are, number one, we can't just give funds. If we're going to give funds, we have to actively be involved with the activities. So, the 4 people that you see here are going to be involved with that. And we do strategic grants and we do annual grants. So this is a strategic grant that we would like to continue to do based on our last 3-year strategic grant. It's a great opportunity for the school and for us. So that's the professional side. And the personal side, I have an interest because I went through a vocational program myself, which got me into engineering. I also live in Simsbury, and I have 3 kids in Squadron Line, Henry James, in the high school. So I have a personal interest in the community, and so that's going to be the future. And I'll let Craig talk a little bit about the past.
Yeah, I guess this maybe all started like 4 years ago or so, and I think a lot of you know me. My name's Craig Boucher. I live here in town. My daughters went through the school system, and many of you know my wife, Mary, who teaches at the junior high. And so I remember, so I really just want to say 2 things about this. I remember sitting with John about 4 years ago. We were planning this whole thing out. We created the 5-year plan and the vision and this and that. And one thing that we talked about was this: how do we know? How do we know if this succeeds? We know it succeeds if the kids use it.
Yes.
That's what we said. If the kids use it, that's happened.
Yeah.
That's exactly the kind of thing that the Ensign Bickford Foundation wants to get involved in. And the other thing I would want to say is, it wasn't just the teachers doing the work. The kids got involved building that lab. Boy, they're putting skin in the game. That's something else that really stands to say what the students really enjoy about this. They see the value. So, really excited about the next 3 years, and this is, as Aaron said, it's gonna spread this out down through the school system down to K, I guess, and that's just wonderful. We're all pretty excited about that.
So this
Great.
is a 3-year plan of $30,000, $10,000 each year. And we are so thankful for your ongoing commitment and support and mentorship that you provide to students. It just is, it's unbelievable for our students. So thank you for that. So
You've provided a wonderful resource for the kids at the high school, and we're very grateful. And now throughout the whole school system. So thank you all.
It'll now increase our maker spaces at the elementary too, and at the middle school. So we're excited.
That's fabulous.
It's wonderful.
So the other two folks that are here,
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Rigney. I'm a development engineer with Ensign Bickford. I've been there about 2 years now. And I was born and raised Farmington, and what Craig just said resonates with me really well because I went through the Project Lead the Way platform at Farmington, and I'm with Ensign Bickford because of their involvement with Project Lead the Way at Farmington.
Jim Compton?
Yeah.
Jim Compton was the guy we worked with here at Simsbury. I didn't know that.
I've wanted to be here since sophomore year at high school, so that's because of this community outreach stuff, and I'm really excited to be getting involved with it and giving back myself, and kicking off the STEM community outreach team that we're working on at EBAD. So thank you for having me.
That's great.
Now I'm Edris Raji. I'm a Market Segment Director at Ensign Bickford. Also, like Chad, live in Simsbury and was in mechanical engineering undergrad, so I've got the engineering background. And so that's important to me. And I also have a 4-year-old who's going to be going into the school system in kindergarten in Terriffill next year. So definitely looking forward to working with you guys over the next 3 years and making it a success.
That's wonderful.
so before we move forward, we would ask the board to move on this request.
I make a motion that the Board of Education approve the educational specifications for Simsbury High School. Oh, no, wrong run.
That one's not as exciting.
Not nearly as good either. I ripped the wrong page off. I make a
Backside.
motion that we propose the gift of funds from Ensign Bickford Aerospace Defense Company and fund STEM programs be accepted.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Just your guys' commitment to the community over a long period of time is just amazing, and just thank you for all you do.
I love that this program reaches every kid. Every kid is open to this and gives them such a focus, it's such an open world for them.
I would just say, as strategic planning has become such a large part of what we do in the creation of what we've called the vision of the graduate and how we can develop these very competencies that each one of you talked about, having a personalized experience as you went through school. And, it's just proof that we're headed in the right direction, and your commitment in this partnership is just incredibly important to us. So thank you very much.
I think it's admirable that you force involvement.
Encourage.
Yeah, I mean you
Strongly recommend.
you wrap involvement in with the monetary donation to make it a full package. I'm sure there's a win-win on both sides. That's pretty admirable of Ensign Bickford. Thank you.
All right, so now we need a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much. And I know you'd like a picture.
We need a picture.
Yes,
Please. So some board people stand up so we can I'll take it.
We got this wonderful check.
Aaron, why don't you join us since you want to work with us?
you want us to
I don't know, could one of you, if you don't mind?
Here, we can give it to.
So you can be here for Steph?
Good looking.
John,
you gotta.
All right, I'm here.
There you go.
Okay, you have to say STEM when you smile. 1, 2, 3, STEM. Great.
Everyone smile too.
That is actually.
It's done. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I do that to you all the time. I'm so sorry. I didn't expect we'd be moving.
So we don't slow down your meeting, but
That's awesome.
Really awesome. That's very generous.
Just really cool.
Thank you. I'm gonna get Ryan some Simsbury gear. I don't want to see any furniture and stuff here.
Yeah, that's
All right, that was fun.
Nice.
And now on to the roof replacement.
So I will take that one.
really.
And in your exhibit, basically what you have is an outline of what we call educational specifications. So anytime we file a grant application with the state of Connecticut that's going to lead to reimbursement dollars back to the town, you need to include what's called education specs. And they actually include the Board of Ed motion as part of the paperwork you need to file with the state of Connecticut. So this is often done in conjunction with the planning of these projects. This is the roofing project at Simsbury High School that was approved at referendum last year. I don't have the exact dollar figure in front of me. I think it was about a $2.5 million scope of the project, so it's a large-scale project. They're in process of looking at various estimates right now. And David Holden, who is our former business manager, is actually helping in the interim with some of the grant application processes and has a great deal of experience with this. But the specs basically, as you can see, outline the scope. There's some square footage information in there. You have to rationalize to the State Department of Education that, in this case, we plan to continue to have a 912 configuration at the high school so that they know it's a long-term project relative to returns and so forth. So just basic project information, not as detailed as you would see in a renovation like when we looked at Henry James, but it's all part of the same process. So I would ask that the board approve these the specs in these documents, and then we can complete the filing with the State Department of Education.
The best sentence in the description is consideration will be given to minimizing the heat gain on the third floor.
Sharon, question? Sure.
So the process, I know, just looking in the detailed description, so it goes to the state and then it'll come back to us to just process?
So the project is, the dollars for the project have been approved.
Right.
We've begun the grant application with the state. So once that, it's just requirements of the various grant applications, which makes you eligible for the reimbursement. So once that's filed, it's a matter of providing updates to the state and actually closing out the project down the road to the board that you would get involved with, which would trigger reimbursement dollars back to us.
Okay, because it says the actual replacement of the aging system would be determined after testing and recommendations. That's what I was wondering.
So it's just in terms of how you actually, when you go out to bid the project, there's some different variants and some different tests they're doing to determine what's the actual material they want to use on the roof, kind of technical aspects of roofing itself.
Okay. That was all I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I get a motion, please? Anyone?
Would you like me to make the motion that I tried to make before?
Sure.
Okay. The Board of Education approves the educational specifications for the Simsbury High School partial roof replacement project.
I'll second it. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, information and reports.
All right, so Neil is going to carry us through tonight what is really the most significant budget presentation that we'll have. So as you know, personnel coupled with insurance makes up about 75 to 80% of our overall operating costs. So Neil has a myriad of different things he'll talk about tonight, from enrollment to new requests to some efficiencies that we think we can capture, and we'll certainly have time to open that up to any questions that you do have. But it's a pretty thorough presentation that he's put together.
Excellent, thank you. excited to present it tonight. I think that you'll see that it's responsive to the enrollment trends in terms of the requests that we're making, that it does move us forward in a couple of areas in terms of curriculum enhancements, and is responsive in terms of looking for savings. So what I do want to say is to start so that your budget books, if you did bring your budget book, or if you need to do this later when you get home, the presentation is given to you in hard copy. It goes under a tab called Enrollment and Staffing. So Mr. Tyndall will demonstrate.
We also have an update on the historical information.
Oh,
Okay,
terrific.
which is a favorite sheet of many. It was missing a page.
It's the Mike Gilman Memorial
it is.
Historical Sheet.
All right.
So with that said, we always want to start with the context before we talk about what our proposals or recommended positions in here are, and that has to do with enrollment. We didn't do as extensive an enrollment report as we have sometimes. I did the October 1st report. I didn't bring the projections to you because they actually, if you see this slide, the projections from Malone and McBroom actually came that exactly flat enrollment for if you look at where we are in 19, 20, and 21. The slides are set up this way. I'm going to just orient you to much of the presentation. We choose the 2008-9 school year because it really represented a high mark, one of the highest marks, not the very highest, but one of the highest marks, both in terms of enrollment and staffing. So it's a really good year to look at in terms of as things have trended downward in both staffing and enrollment. Chose the not exact midpoint, but because 12-13 was when we hit 4,500 as a good marker of where we were on all of these things. And then you'll see current of 1920. So as you know from our October 1st report, we had 4,025 students, and Malone and McBroom is saying we'll have 4,025 students again based on their projection. But the devil is in the details with, you can see a pretty significant increase of 57 students at the elementary level, offset by an almost identical decline of 59 students at Simsbury High School as those smaller cohorts now work their way into the high school. So not surprisingly, as I go forward with their presentation, you're going to see enrollment-driven requests coming at the elementary level and potential reductions coming at the high school level. So that'll make sense as we work our way through the presentation. In addition to looking at enrollment, we try to take the snapshot of staffing at those same points in time. So if you take that high mark and look toward the right-hand portion of the slide, when we had 4,900 students, there we were just short of 700 FTE in terms of certified, non-certified, and administrative positions. By the time we hit that 4,500 mark, the reduction had come to 655, and now at 4,025 students, the FTE count is 644. That's a decline in that time of 53 positions in the budget. And interestingly, if you look back to the left of the slide, it's almost a 50-50 split between certified and non-certified. There's been a reduction of about 25 positions in each of those areas. Primarily enrollment-driven reductions that we've been able to make. At the same time that we've made enrollment-driven reductions, this board has obviously supported a lot of positions that have moved the curriculum forward. You've fought hard for these things over the years. In general education, we certainly last year enhanced the elementary world language program by moving it back to 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. This board has significantly made a commitment to instructional coaches and math and more math tutoring. Going back further, you'll see a significant commitment of FTE to get to full-day kindergarten within this time frame, and a whole move to improve the elective programs at Simsbury High School and move to an 8-period day. Under special education, the board has the positions most recently that the board has supported are social worker positions, and Sue has made strong recommendations to you over the last few years, and we've been able to do that at both the elementary and the high school level. She talked at her presentation a couple of weeks ago about that growing preschool program, and we have put support in the form of an additional teacher in there, made some further commitment to Ready, Set, Go, and have also in needed areas, added teachers and paraprofessionals. That's offsetting some reductions, but the enrollment-driven reductions and kind of some specialized additions that the board had to support, specifically as a very intense population moved through the high school. You'll remember we added some special ed positions in there. So a lot, I think a responsible balance of, yes, many positions have been reduced, but the board has moved the program forward. So moving forward, we use this term, the roll forward. If we didn't change any positions, we just took the existing personnel and moved it forward into next year, what would that look like? And as is no surprise, we already have negotiated contracts for most of our groups. So the top 4 lines would demonstrate what would be the increase for the teacher's contract, which is clearly the largest of those increases. It was a good and fair settlement, but that's going to result in almost $1 million of new costs. Much smaller increases for administrators, nurses, and NAGE, just because there's a lot less FTE in those areas. Line number 5 on there, contracts to be settled, would include our annual approval of unaffiliated contracts, but also this spring, our second largest bargaining unit that consists of our secretaries and paraeducators is up for a negotiation. So we've put a placeholder figure in there. We won't know the actual results of that till later in the spring, but this is an approximate number for budgeting purposes. Right now, we're saying that a 6% increase to employee insurance costs is an appropriate estimate, given what the claims that have come in and what recommendation we're getting from our insurance consultant Lockton, that this is as good an approximation in late January as you can get to say 6% is a proper budgeting number.
And Neil, that's refined a bit just so the board knows from the fixed cost sheet we initially looked at that I believe, Amy, am I on point, when we started with a 9, right? So that is providing some financial flexibility a little bit as we go through the planning process. Sorry to jump in.
No, that's
Can I just add to that too?
Yeah.
We have a meeting with Lockton next week, and we'll get the finalized budget numbers for health insurance then, so we'll know by next Wednesday.
It'll help at the workshop.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then a smaller increase for some of our pension and other OPEB is other post-employment benefits. Those are not for our teachers and administrators, but for our non-certified groups. That all-in cost on those additions is a little over $1.8 million. Our board will be used to the way that we reduce some of those dollars, which is planned retirements. We do save some salary dollars from retirements because a teacher at the top of the pay scale is typically one that's retiring, and we would hire somebody. We don't plan to hire at the bottom of the pay scale. Our placeholder puts it at about the middle, and each of those retirements can result in about $25,000 of salary savings. Right now, we have 5 retirements that we absolutely know about, that as you approve motions over the years, we know of 5, and we think that an additional 5 based on historical trends between now and the end of the year is an appropriate estimate to say that 10 certified retirements is an accurate budgeting number. So when you subtract that 10 times $25,000, the overall cost is $1.6 million increase, which is about 2.28%. Recalling that the Board of Finance's guideline to us was 2.5%. So that's if we just roll everything forward. Not a surprise in that your personnel costs are going to eat up most of your increase. We'll break it down now by the levels as we look at the proposals. Take a look at elementary enrollment, and you can see at that high mark of 2008-9, as we had 2,500 students in K through 6, that in terms of classroom teachers, we were at 109 and a half FTE. How do you get a half a teacher? Because you had half-day kindergarten back then, is the answer to that riddle. This is just classroom teachers. This is not all the art, music, PE. This is just K through 6 classroom teachers. I put 12, 13 in there because while the population had dropped considerably, it only drops 1.5 teachers, but that's why the note on the bottom. That's when you committed to a reinvestment of your FTE to bring in full-day kindergarten, and that was a significant increase in FTE. The bottom point of this one was 2017-18, just a few years ago, where we had 96 classroom teachers. That has inched up over the last couple of years, 4 additions in the last 2 years, to right now, as we speak, be 100 teachers. And the budget proposal is going to call for 2 more based on that increase of 57 students at the elementary level. Where do we think those 2 teachers will come? And you can see it here on this slide. There's one that we have no doubt that the kindergarten cohort at Latimer Lane, which right now has 23 students in each kindergarten class. We're supporting that with some tutor help. We experience increases from K to 1 typically, not large ones, but this is going to require that we have 4 kindergartens at Latimer Lane next year. Similarly, we currently have 4 kindergartens at Squadron Line. That number's likely to go up, and we're going to need 5 kindergartens at Squadron Line next year. So 2 FTE, the placeholder salary and benefits for a mid-range teacher in this year's budget. You'll see that number of $92,000 on a lot of places on this. It's a good budgeting number. And then the other one, Sue spoke 2 weeks ago about the need for some additional special ed staffing due to increased enrollment at Latimer Lane, our school that is growing the fastest, and that special ed population has increased. So,
Neil, in that placeholder, that 92 is salary plus benefits.
Salary plus health benefits as a
Thank you.
placeholder. Okay, so 2.5 additional positions and approximately $230,000. At the secondary level, we break down enrollment at the 2 different schools. At Henry James, 838 just over a decade ago, and the certified FTE in the building was about 68 teachers. And you can see we came down almost 10 teachers from that. There's 200 fewer students right now, 633 students at Henry James, and just short of 59 teachers. The moving forward to next year, you're going to see in a moment, we're proposing the addition of a teacher at Henry James, and specifically in a proposal that Scott Baker and Anjanette Belmonte talked about to increase PE and health staffing at Henry James, and we're pretty excited about that. I'll talk about it in a minute. Looking at class sizes at Henry James and what that level of staffing results in, some board members may recall that there's been a debate over the 2 grade levels. In the past, we've had 3 full teams on one grade level and 2.6 on the other. Scott and Anjanette made a decision last year to even out the teams, to say we should have 2.8 teams at each grade level. And that will make for a more consistent approach. They actually made that decision based on looking at the 3 years. It wasn't a 1-year decision. So if you look below, they do it this way this year. Clearly, with a cohort coming in that's estimated at 306, this is an appropriate way to staff the school. And the next grade after that, which is current grade 5, is 310. So Scott was really consciously making a 3-year decision of how he was going to staff his school. And the next time we would look at this hard is a couple of years from now, when the students who are in grade 4 today are entering grade 7. Simsbury High School, it's across the many disciplines and many classes. It's harder to look at class size, so we're just looking at FTE here. At 1,560 students, you can see there was approximately 130 FTE. Why an increase from 2008-9 to 2012-13? That's when we significantly enhanced our electives and moved to the 8-period day, and it did require some increased staffing. But since then, you can see that 13 FTE have been saved based on an enrollment drop of 200 students. That has happened because we have looked hard at every resignation and retirement and made some strategic decisions about whether it needed to, that position needed to be replaced at that time. Given another 60 student drop in enrollment, you can see that our projection here says we might be able to realize more savings this year, and are proposing a decrease of 2 FTE at Simsbury High School, sort of to offset that elementary increase that you saw in the other slide. So what are our proposals at the secondary level? We're certainly excited curricularly about the first one. The curriculum committee in particular will know that there is a significant requirement coming forward for the current freshmen at Simsbury High School, a state requirement to complete a capstone experience by it's supposed to happen during junior or senior year for those students. Next year will be their sophomore year, and we need to get some resources in places to start really the intense plan. We're already planning for this, but we really think that it's time to commit a resource to the more intense planning. So we don't know if this will be the title eventually. Right now, we're calling it a Vision of the Graduate Capstone Coordinator. Erin's actually drafting a job description right now that she's
It's in draft form.
but we really picture this as a teacher leader who wants to take on some really exciting work about what would be the structure for students, both in terms of independent projects, in terms of coursework, in terms of already existing experiences in some of our elective areas that require students to complete capstone-like projects. And the challenge for our high school, small high schools actually with less students in the senior class are often more easily able to adapt to this. It's when you have a large population and saying every single kid has to have this experience, you've got to find a lot of different pathways for every kid to be able to do that. So what we're looking for is probably somebody on our existing staff who really wants to take on that work and then do a backfill of that position we think that the person who will succeed in this position is someone with knowledge of Simsbury High School curriculum already. That's not to say it couldn't be an outside candidate who's excited about that work, but that's kind of how we're picturing it right now.
So this person would be dedicated to the capstone. They wouldn't be teaching and doing this. They are dedicated to coordinating the program.
So that's all yet to be defined at this point right now, but we're looking at a 3 to 5 year plan. Next year, as Neil just talked about, is such a planning year. So beginning to reach out, network, really design the program. We also know there will have to be like a custom capstone program because there could be 50, 100 students that have difficulty really identifying what their area of interest will be. We also need this person to reach out to the community. We need to find mentors. We need to find places in which kids can go out and do internships. The following year, this person would definitely be doing those custom capstone classes. So it's all yet to be explicitly defined. But
it's not a position
But
that
it's
has
a full-time
teaching.
job.
it is not a full
That's what
piece.
Susan
Oh,
asked,
okay,
yeah.
it is not
Capstone
that.
coordinator, that's
Is
a
the
full-time
responsibility.
position.
Right. And we want them to research and get out and really work, to see how it's happening in other places. And so I think it's an exciting position, and I think it's going to have high interest as we move forward.
Okay.
So that's our way of moving the curriculum and expectations forward at Simsbury High School, and that team is very excited about it. And then I would point to the Henry James position. Scott and Anjanette presented to you in the fall about middle school being the exactly right time for kids to be getting more exposure to health curriculum as they're making decisions about wellness in their lives. And it's also, I would note, kids don't get physical activity every day due to the schedule at Henry James. Probably as you stop recess, adding PE time, getting kids moving more is a positive for students at the middle level. So right now, we have 4.4 PE and health teachers at Henry James. With an addition of this position, you would get to 5.4 teachers. And if you think about all the other departments, when I showed you that 2.8 and 2.8, a full department at Henry James right now is 5.6 teachers. So by adding this teacher, you make PE and health a full class that kids can take, and they literally get it every day, instead of kind of the patchwork way they get it now.
How many at the high school?
How many?
Health and wellness.
About five plus kids at the high school take PE and health for a semester each year of high school.
Yeah.
This would allow middle school kids to take it for the whole year every day.
So we have the same number for.
Twice as many kids, but they're only taking it for half a year.
Two questions. The Henry James, is this going to then change their, because I always, one, curriculum, right? Do they need, did something change? Like, why would they take it every day? And then two, did this now change the schedule? Because I always thought the reason why they had that second week rotating is because of the health and wellness.
Yes.
So would this change
So it
that?
could impact that. When we went to that new schedule, what happened, we went from 4 quarters to 3 to the trimester model. So they get, in the 4 quarters, there was health, family consumer science, tech engineering, and art. When we went to the trimester, it expanded the art, family consumer science, and tech engineering, put PE and health together, but it also increased the number of times kids had study halls at the middle school. This will decrease the study hall time for the middle school kids, and what we're looking for, and we haven't had, but we're looking for the dual certified PE health teacher so that there's ongoing conversation. So it's it's PE health across 180 school days, not just 1 quarter. We think it's developmentally appropriate, that it will really help these students design habits for life about what physical activity and the social emotional aspect of it is, having ongoing conversations around wellness throughout the school year certainly makes a difference than if you only had it the first quarter or the last quarter or in the middle of the year. It spans over the course of the school year. And we think that's a pretty positive way to interact with and engage middle school students. Does that answer your question?
So is that a change? Is that a change from like?
It will decrease the number of study halls, and they'll have.
The other reason why they have that, so that was a piece of it, Jen.
Yeah.
But it doesn't completely alleviate what you're talking about, because the music is still tied up in that having a slightly different schedule on the week 1 versus the week 2.
Oh, that's the one. Okay, that's it.
So music is still playing a piece in why they're running the schedule the way they are.
And would Joe Smith in 7th grade have more days of gym and health, or really the same amount of days? It's just
More days.
More days.
More days.
So are you saying, just so is it gym one day, health the next? Is it in every
No,
other? Or there's
it would probably be a unit
unit.
that is a PE unit that they might do for 3 weeks, and then they might be in the health classroom for a week and a half. And so it wouldn't be,
to those units.
Right.
it wouldn't be, kind of a back and forth. It would be depending more on what is that unit of instruction.
Okay.
They've built health classrooms right across from the gym. So it's very flexible space for those
So
teachers.
like where the locker rooms used to be?
Yes, yeah.
And I think the redesign of the high school wellness program for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders and the lifelong activities really is pushing more topics to the middle school level, giving more time to be able to engage students in those as well.
Is anybody concerned, though, about the lack of study hall, or is it really, will there be a significant lack?
There will still be study hall for students opposite when they have their music.
They still will have that.
That will still exist.
Last question. And those kids that do the programs that are like all 8th grade, all they do is tech ed, those kids will still be getting this same program?
Yes, they will. Yep. So those are the...
I just have one thing?
Sure.
If there are more questions about some of these new positions, let us know. We can bring more in-depth rationale
To the
to the workshop.
Mhm.
You know what I mean, in terms, as we think through what
That
these
would be
things
great
are.
if we did. Mhm.
Yep.
In fact, I'll have Anjanette work up what a schedule would look like
That'd be
with
really
that in
helpful.
there so that you can
Yeah.
see it.
That makes sense?
Yeah, that
Okay.
would be good.
Yeah, can you, like, including music and,
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
the specials, all
Yep.
the specials, or whatever you
Yep.
want to call them, electives.
Okay, so those are the exciting things we want to move forward. How do you pay for them? I think you do it through a decline of 60 students at Simsbury High School, so that, as I said, we've looked hard at every resignation and retirement we've had to say, all right, as a department shrinks, how much FTE can you capture? We've done that strategically on this department has a retirement this year. We're going to try to capture a full teacher from that that particular department, because that means no current teacher loses their job. And that's often how we've tried to look at that. Board members who have been with us for a while know that we hedge our bets right now in late January because students are just now signing up for their classes. We'll do the in-depth analysis over the next month, and we'll know for sure what we are able to do by late February, early March. If we have to adjust that number, if we look at it and say we just can't get -3 teachers at Simsbury High School, we might have to look at whether we have to make budget adjustments to some of the other things we want to do. But 3 right now, I think is a good estimate. So when I said earlier that Simsbury High School was a -2, it's a +1 on the capstone coordinator and a -3 on the bottom. So you can see how the dollars work out there. And then what I'm going to finish with is some summary slides. Try to capture them in themes. This is something we might eventually want to share with the Board of Finance of how we're making our personnel decisions in terms of themes. Some of it are enrollment-driven needs, and those are coming at the elementary level. That's not a surprise. What are the ways that we're trying to move our program forward? It's through the curriculum enhancements at the high school with the capstone coordinator and the wellness position at Henry James. I like that in that it addresses all 3 levels. It's something elementary, high school, and middle school. And how are we doing it? It's through responsible reductions of classroom teachers. And in a moment, I'm going to estimate for you how many non-certified reductions I think we can make. So that's this slide. And you can see our certified additions are the classroom teacher at Latimer Lane, the classroom teacher at Squadron, special ed teacher for a half teacher at Latimer, capstone coordinator, a wellness teacher for a +4.5, and -3 classroom teachers at SHS. And then again, through retirements and looking at resignations, we every spring and summer are looking at our non-certified positions and saying, are there efficiencies that we can capture, especially if some of those come at the high school? You know, are there secretary or paraprofessional, or are there reductions that we can responsibly take? And trying to say, again, that with flat enrollment, a 4,025 projection for next year, which is flat, that having a staffing total that is somewhere near 0 is appropriate.
How do you, I know this is not an easy answer. The special education teachers, how do you determine how many more? I mean, half doesn't seem like, it's a flat enrollment, but the enrollment is coming in at the lower grades.
So we actually looked at the amount of student increase that were students with IEPs at Latimer, and it's been a +20 with no additional adding of staff. where over time, like for example, preschool, or over time when we looked at the high school and their growing populations, we added staff there. So we think that overall, with this budget and looking at what the needs are, 0.5 would effectively address some of that bump in enrollment, specifically for students with IEPs.
And is it, do you do the number of students with IEPs, like a ratio to like a caseload almost?
Exactly. And we look at what those caseloads look like, not only within buildings, but across buildings.
Are caseloads?
They're higher at Latimer.
Okay.
They're higher at Latimer.
And the one thing there for the teachers, it's not.
How are you?
I guess it's not. The caseload's not too high for people.
Well, I think it's reaching the point as we see the increase in the general education enrollment at Latimer, and we see those bumps, both at Latimer at Squadron, we're seeing that bump in the special ed enrollment, and so we think that this is a way to balance those needs accordingly.
I guess what I'm trying to too nicely ask is, do we have too heavy of a caseload for people, and we're managing it to that same too heavy of a caseload by adding the extra half, or do we need, another full person to kind of make it a more manageable caseload?
No, we think by looking at that 0.5 that it addresses the concerns in the way that really appropriately meets students' needs.
Okay. And staff's needs too.
And staff's needs as well. I had shared, Todd, in my presentation that with special education, a one can look very differently, meaning one student with an IEP could have a kind of a lower level of need as far as direct and specialized instruction, or it could be a student that required many hours of specialized instruction. So it's not just about the caseload number, it's also about the manageable hours within that
and
caseload,
I knew it wasn't
if that
just
makes sense.
a mathematical thing, and
Not just a class size
yeah,
equation.
I just wanted to make sure that the half wasn't like let's just go for a
Band-aid,
half when we really probably need a full. I just
I
want
think
to
it's a good comparative.
It's a great question.
Can I just ask you a question real
Sure.
quick? The two elementary school teachers, putting on my facilities hat. for a
Yes.
second, do we have the space? Considering we know that both those schools are bursting at the seams of
Yeah.
space.
So there's definitely going to have to be some consolidation. Mike Luzetti and I walk Latimer Lane frequently. We definitely have a plan for one additional classroom at Latimer. If we were to have a different cohort that late, summer or late in the summer, 2 is going to be a challenge, but we would have to make some sacrifices about what space would get moved and get creative, and we could be using a stage again for some services. I mean, we've done that in the past. If it goes beyond next year, I think we have to take a hard look, depending on where we are with facilities and enrollment, of how soon Latimer Lane might get some help. But that's clearly the building. I worry more about Latimer than I do Squadron. Squadron's got sort of enough capacity that you can always find space. If not comfortably, you can find it. So.
Good question.
So now take the roll forward slide, and in yellow, you can see all my pluses and minuses. So by the time you take 4.5 new requests for teachers, it takes the dollar figure up to almost $2.3 million of addition, which would be a 3.21% increase. But then how do we get it back under the Board of Finance cap? And that's where we have the retirements, the certified reductions and the non-certified reductions, and sort of kind of get it almost exactly back to the number that I started with, which is that 2.25. So I say 2.25 because, remember, we've only looked at, with a special ed report and then this report, we've only looked at personnel drivers. We still have to look at equipment, supplies, textbooks, professional development. The workshop next week is going to handle all of those line items, and there will be increases in some of those too that are going to push us really up against the guideline that we have.
And I think one of the challenges, so to speak, that we're going to be faced with in the coming years, a little different than the past, decade, is there was just more flexibility with that significant decline K-12 to absorb and move towards a tight target than there is now, because the additional elementary sections are what they are, right? They're completely enrollment driven. So it's that balance we've always tried to talk about and work with of how can we be as responsible as we can be, but still be strategic about moving the district forward with the other important things that the Board of Finance has talked about and laid out, like mill rate considerations and so forth. So that enrollment does drive so much in the shift in the trend that we're going to be faced with now that we're even and we're going to be moving forward, are going to lead to different kinds of budget. I can see leading to different kinds of budget conversations for us.
And then not entirely budget-driven, or that they would be small dollar amounts, but just some additional personnel considerations. These are based on requests that came from our principals and others. We do have to take a hard look at the elementary specials program, art, music, and PE, because when you add classroom sections, those are additional sections that have to go get art, music, and PE. So there are times where we might have to fold in a grade level to make it work. So that those K sections that I was talking about at those other schools, while you might have 5 sections of first grade, maybe when they go to art, music, and PE, we fold them back to 4, so that there's an ability to get them, and there's just some shared numbers in there as a way to not add FTE. But with that, we have to take a look at how big that number is. The strain for instrumental music right now is not surprisingly coming at Latimer, and addition at Henry James. We think we can move some existing personnel around to address it, and we have a retirement of an instrumental music teacher in mid-year of next year that might allow us to get creative there in how we meet the needs of students. We are building a important resource in an auditorium at Henry James. It's going to need some support, not nearly at the level that the high school auditorium needs support. But what we're picturing here is maybe making a portion of a music teacher's schedule be about the technical needs of the auditorium, and saying, kind of getting creative with the music staff at Henry James. The high school particularly had some just small stipended positions that needed attention. There's a whole program that you don't want to get into the details of about chemical hygiene and disposing of chemicals. Right now, our department supervisor there is not a chemistry teacher, and the person who does that probably should be, because it's about tracking and disposing of chemicals. So it's basically offering an after-school stipend to a teacher to take care of that important work. Our unified sports program, as you know, has exploded, and our unified sports coaches had a meeting with Sue and I last week to appropriately advocate for themselves. It's just a lot more hours than it used to be in terms of what unified sports is about. We also have a proposal from our director of safety and security about eventually having greeters in the buildings who handle visitors into the building. This is a model that does exist in some other local districts. That those are, and if you picture more like the high school where you come into the front lobby and you're greeted by security, that's a place we would like to get to. That's pretty big budget dollars, and it's not something that we're able to support in this budget, but I would try to maybe pilot a school or two if the dollars are there next summer. That's something we'll monitor, and like, as I like to say too, that's good from a security standpoint. It's also good from the fact that greeting those visitors and opening that door all day long is hard on our secretaries. It's like they have work to do. That is, so it's good for security and it's good for secretaries, and it might be a real win, but it's enough dollars that we cannot do this all at once. It would be something that we have to be thoughtful of planning long term. So that is our enrollment and staffing report. Hopefully you agree that it's responsive to where the needs are, and it does move us forward. And I know we did questions along the way, but I'm happy to answer anything else that's on anyone's mind.
Anybody?
I just have one quick question. The language, elementary language teachers, I know are the high school teachers, or are they?
Just
Where
one.
do they show up at the high school or at the elementary in your FTEs?
So they actually show up in both places. So it's what that teacher is 60% high school and 40% elementary. So the FTE count would be 0.6 at high school and 0.4 at elementary. So to staff elementary world language, we have 2 full-time teachers plus that 0.4. So it takes 2.4 to do it across
all
5 schools. Yep.
Anybody else? I just wanted to ask, you referenced the instrumental music at Latimer and Henry James. Is that to provide lessons for the kids?
Exactly, instrumental lessons.
Okay.
Yeah, not band. That's covered. And just to be clear, the strain is more on strings, orchestra instruments, than it is band instruments. Okay. And so the retirement that we have, it's sort of planning to say, can we find somebody that can do both strings and band? That's what we have a teacher at Central School who does that. And that's a really valuable resource because it allows us to be more flexible. And so we'd probably be going out to recruit somebody who could do both.
Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. So there's one other thing, and I don't know if that's taken into consideration, the curriculum and what we'll need. So we have a requirement, a policy that has to go in and a class that needs to go in for 2021, the mandate from the state. So
for African American and Latino studies.
Right.
Yes.
So is that,
2022.
how is that going to be addressed? Is it through current teachers or?
It's actually for 22-23 is the mandated year.
Okay.
There is a group through the State Department of Ed that are creating the curriculum, and we're waiting to see what that looks like. But that would also, it's an elective course and would be put into our program of studies.
So it's not 2021, it's the following
Yeah.
year. Okay.
But to your point, Sharon, once, I don't want to speak for you or you, but I just want to clarify. So once we have a better idea what the scope of that course is, we can look at the people we have available to staff and know whether that's a new hire or we can absorb within.
Correct.
Right. My guess being that that's an elective course. The students who choose to take that will be choosing to not take a different elective. And so therefore you're looking at an existing social studies teacher who takes on that course so, I mean, I don't think it's a huge FTE commitment, but if it's popular, it might be. I mean, if it's very popular course, I do think that that's possible.
Anything? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now quarterly budget analysis.
The highlight of the evening.
So glad you're here.
This report did, when Burke did this, we'd call it the what do we used to call it?
The riveting.
The
Riveting.
Quarterly
riveting.
analysis.
Quarterly
Riveting.
All right, so on the revenue side, just to start at the top, we got our final state and federal grant award notices. So this gives us some good numbers to work with for our year-end projections. The only exception to this is the excess cost grant, which is only a preliminary estimate, and we'll have our final estimates in late April. We did receive our ECS entitlement. It's only about $3,700 in excess of budgetary estimates. So nothing to write home about, but better positive than negative. On the expenditure side, if you look all the way to the bottom, you'll see that your percent spent in fiscal year 20 compared to the same period in fiscal year 19 is very comparable. So 45.88% compared to 45.18%. So on the next page, I'll take you through some of the individual line item highlights in that chart. Under general control, there is a slight increase in the percentage of spending this time of year compared to the same time last year. There were some staff retirements where there were payouts related to those entire retirements, and the also forthcoming it hasn't, well, I guess it's kind of started yet, but it's not reflected in the numbers yet, is there's going to be some staffing at the central office to help out in the absence of Burke. So those anticipations do not quite have a funding source yet, so we're looking at possibly using some of the non-lapsing funds to cover those costs. Another highlight under insurance and pension, during the fiscal year 20 budget process, the increased insurance costs, we thought we were going to have to use about $300,000 of the non-lapsing fund. And then as the year progressed, we only have to use $150,000 of the non-lapsing fund. So some good news there. And then the last item I wanted to point out is the out-of-district tuition. So this is an increase compared to the same time last year. We did have 2 additional out-of-district students. We had 1 less out-of-district students that is eligible for the excess cost reimbursement. However, although there is 1 less student, the value of services for the students that we do have is greater than last year. So good news, bad news, we do have excess expenditures related to those students, but we are expecting an excess reimbursement from the excess cost reimbursement grant. That's all I have as far as highlights on that. If anybody has any questions, Matt can answer them.
Amy, you're quick.
I've been here like 2 weeks.
Sharon?
So just for ha-has for me, I mean, I know that the money goes directly from the state, this is ECS,
Yeah.
to us, but how do we come up with that? Is it a formula or?
There is a formula. It's a convoluted formula. It's been a formula that's seen some tweaks over recent years. It really has 3 main kind of global components to it. One is the enrollment basis. So that's one of the key factors that fluctuates it. The other 2 is called a foundational amount. So there's an allotted amount for each child. In that foundational amount, there's a bunch of subcategories. So that's where they look at a town's wealth index. They'll look at a town's Title I allotment, or kind of a poverty index. They'll look at English language as second learners and how those things vary over time. I can't tell you the intricacies of the models, but for that foundational amount, those are the 3 main components there. And then there's the town's ability, it's like a wealth index, the town's ability to draw tax revenue outside of property taxes. So it's like an adjusted grand list technique. So what you'll see kind of in differences in communities, like Farmington, which has a much lower mill rate, does not receive as high of a ECS allotment because they have the ability to offset revenue in a different way than a Simsbury, where I don't know what the percentage, Amy, is, you may know. The percentage of our tax revenue that actually comes from homeowners is tremendously high in a town like Simsbury, much higher than it is in a town like Avon or a Farmington that has a much bigger industrial base.
Okay. So, and what made me ask the question is because when the statement that said that we had like that additional 3, and I was saying, how did that happen? And I was just trying to understand that.
So it's one of those areas, I mean, which we've seen movement in, Title I movement. We've talked about that a little bit, right? Demographics changing a little and enrollment changing. So I would say those, if I had to garner a guess of where that fluctuation is, it's probably there.
Thank you for the explanation.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, audit report.
All right, this one's my baby. So Bloom Shapiro came and conducted the fiscal year 19 audit. If you look at the first little chart there, this is your revenues and expenditures on a budgetary basis, which is how you all are used to seeing them. On your revenues, you can see that our final budget came in, our actuals came in a lot higher than our final budget by about 2.8 million. And I have the breakdown of some of those items. I'll give you the large ones. So we had property taxes in excess of budgetary estimates by about 887,000. Our ECS grant last year came in excess of budgetary estimates by 626,000. We had some additional FEMA money back from the October 2011 storm for $120,000. Related to the Board of Education, we had an increase in regular tuition of $43,000. Our building department fees increased over budget $468,000 due to the solar project. And I believe that covers the main things where we ended up over budget on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, there was a slight variance of the $5,341. This entirely relates to the savings in the Board of Education budget. Moving down to the excess of revenues over expenditures, and here it says GAAP basis. And the reason that we look at GAAP basis here is because the bond rating agencies review the GAAP basis. They don't care about the budgetary basis. So here you'll see your breakdown of the general fund balance. As of 6/30/19, we ended at $17,109,000. And then subtracted out of that is funds that are reserved or committed. $385,000 of that is your Board of Education non-lapsing fund, and then $264,000 is assigned for purchase orders that have not been paid. This brings you down to your 6/30/19 general fund balance of $16,460,000. So this is 17% of total operating expenditures. AAA bond rated agencies, as we are typically around 15.5%, so we are very healthy. Moving on to the next page. Just a quick note under the fund balance for the capital and CNR funds, $1,021,000 is the fund balance as of 6/30/19. The majority of this, about $900,000, relates to our capital reserve, which we're trying to build up. We did receive a management advisory letter. Some of the items highlighted under here are the accounting procedures manual. That one has been on for a couple of years now. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we're switching over to a new accounting system with Munis. And when we switch over, basically all of our procedures and manuals are going to change. So chances are you're going to see this comment again next year, and the following year it will go away after we've implemented Munis and we bring everything together. The fraud risk assessment is a standard comment from Bloom Shapiro that you get every year if you haven't had one done. We have included it in the fiscal year 21 capital plan to have done, so that should come off the list if approved as part of the capital plan. And then on the next page, we had a federal single audit because we do receive a lot of federal funds. So this one is not a management comment. This one is a finding. So what happened last year is the federal government updated their purchasing guidelines related to the use of the federal grants. And as part of this update, the federal government has required that their purchasing rules and guidelines be included in our policies. It's not enough that we just know about their policies. We have to include them in our policies. So basically, we spend their money. They want us to follow their rules. So anyone that didn't have their policy updated at 6/30 automatically got this finding. This happened to multiple communities, not just us. Luckily, it should be a quick fix though. The town did update its policy last year, so the federal language is already included in the town side. So all we're gonna do is take the town's policy, take the federal language, put it in the Board of Ed policy, and we'll be compliant, and this finding will go away for next year. So the risk associated with a finding is that it could affect your federal funding. However, although there's no guarantee, the auditors don't feel like this is going to be an issue because there were so many communities that got this finding that just have to update their policy. But aside from being in compliance with the policy, the town of Simsbury and the Board of Education were completely in compliance. There was no issues there. It really was just the written language being within our policy.
This is something we'll move through our policy committee in pretty short order and bring forward. Yep.
Yes. Great. That's all I have on that.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for anybody? All right. Thank you very much.
Standing intro by Amy.
Okay, so that brings us to our second public audience. Is there anybody who would like to speak? All right. Seeing none, we do have to go into executive session to discuss a student matter. But before we do that, I do want to just mention that once again, we're going to, our 6:30 meeting time, just to remind people, and that at our second meeting in February, so I'm going to just tell you so you can put it on your calendars now. We're asking if the board can meet at 6 o'clock so we can do a walkthrough at Latimer.
That's the 25th, Susan.
February 25th, sorry, February 25th. So if you can mark your calendars, 6 o'clock, so we can kind of take a walk through the building as we move through the master planning process. It's important for all of us to kind of know the building we're talking about. So if you can be there a half an hour early, we will get a tour of Latimer, and then we will host our meeting at Latimer Lane School.
Great idea.
All right? So just so everyone's aware. All right. Do we need a motion to go into executive session?
Yeah, I make a motion, we go into executive session.
I second the motion.
Great, thank you.
It doesn't.